Make sure that don't come on there.
Whoops. Major spoiler alert there, Jeff. Good night alive. Don't you figure he would want his fans to hear it from him and not from you?
No. He told me I could say something. It's not official.
Terrible. Ollie, get out of here. Piss off.
Stoner might have said something to me about it.
Yes. It's supposed to be on the down low. Here we go.
There we go. 3, 2, 1.
Boom, and welcome to the Big Honker Podcast, brought to you by Blindgrass. I'm just old Jeff Stanfield, but I do have the world-famous Andy Shaver with me.
That is right. I'll carry you through this. Blind grass. Now listen, they don't just make blind grass for your blinds. They also got shotgun cases and dry bags. So if you're going to be on the boat all summer, don't let your cell phone take a plunge. Put it in the dry bag, get it from Blind Grass. And
from the wonderful world of West Virginia, or do you want to be a Texan?
I'm a Texan now.
Tom Geisbert. Right. Did I get that right?
Geisbert, correct.
Geisbert. You're a virologist?
Yes, a virologist.
And who do you work for?
I work for the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston.
I had a friend of mine who went to medical school there.
Yeah, I'm a professor there.
So you're teaching them guys?
Yeah, I'm a doctor, but not a medical doctor. I'm a PhD.
Well, I still have more respect for that than I do someone that teaches attorneys. Because you know attorneys come from anal sex. It's a known fact. And also with us today, the world-famous Bucky Nail.
World famous, huh?
World famous. Well, you were probably pretty famous. Everybody from Albany knows who you are, don't they?
Yeah, all 1,200 of them.
It's a good place to be, though.
It is. It's a great place.
Y'all don't have very many Democrats there, do you?
Few.
How many do you think you have?
100.
Everybody knows who the trash is in town, don't they?
Yeah, pretty much.
We had a guy in Knox City bitching to me about when all this went down. He said there was going to be a bunch of riots and shit. This was before the election, either. And I go, who's going to do all the rioting? Well, you know, my daughter told me it's going to get really bad here. I go, why? He goes, well, because, you know, should we stick a Trump sign in our yard because we don't want any problems? I said, no. I said, there's 3 you dumbasses in town. We all know who you are.
Voting for Biden and wanted to get protected in Knox City, Texas by putting a Trump sign in his yard. Like, are you freaking kidding me? Just
I did tell him, I said, you're lucky. There's somebody like me that lives by you that will protect your dumbass.
No kidding, right?
Yeah, he's a fucking idiot. So anyways, Tom, you work for you're a virologist.
Right.
This COVID thing that we're going through right now, we have been for a year. Now they're saying there's a second strain. That's pretty common with any virus, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what viruses do. Viruses evolve to their environment, to their host. So a virus, a successful virus doesn't want to kill its host. It wants to live forever and keep propagating. So, but it's there's actually multiple variants of it's actually the SARS-CoV-2 virus that causes the disease COVID-19. But this is what viruses do. You're always going to have variants. It's evolution. It's like any population. Over time, it's survival of the fittest, right? So, any kind of population of wildlife, even, it evolves over time, and the virus is really no different. It's going to evolve, and you're going to have variants because the host, it's a constant battle between the host and the virus. And so your immune system starts to battle the virus, and the virus is, if you think about it like a swarm of bees or something, and there's variants. They're all different. They're not genetically all the same, and there might be some kind of an environmental condition that favors one over another. So as your body fights off, 95% of that swarm, that there's maybe a couple of variants in there or viruses that are slightly different that will take over. But most of the time, those variants really are not going to be, there's always exceptions to every rule, right? But most of the time, they're not really going to be more lethal or cause more disease, than what the wild type virus would cause. Fortunately, in the case of COVID, from what we've seen so far, I mean, we do work with COVID in our lab, and a lot of my colleagues have worked on this. Is we don't know down the road a variant's not going to emerge or pop up that gets around the vaccines or the drugs that have been developed. But so far, it looks like the vaccines, at least the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, are still protective against the variant.
When this first popped up on the national scene, were you guys that were, that study this, were y'all like, ooh, shit, this might be the one to kill us all?
No, in the beginning, I think that there was an outbreak of SARS, what we call SARS-1, the original SARS virus, back in 2003. And there were some cases. They ended up in Canada, for example, in Toronto. And it just kind of burned out. It just kind of died out. And I think that when this first popped up, and we knew what virus it was, we knew it was a coronavirus, we knew it was a SARS-like virus. In the very beginning, back, January of last year, February, in the early days, I don't think anybody thought anything like this would happen.
Right.
So it caught everybody off guard.
What made it so unique to where it just, like wildfire, was everywhere?
The transmissibility. It's very contagious for whatever reason. I don't think it's a unknown question right now, but it's very transmissible from person to person. So it disseminates through the air, very easily. And so I think, a lot of times SARS is like cold, common cold viruses. A lot of those, not all, but a lot of them are caused by coronaviruses. Mm-hmm. And you get that sometimes just by touching something. And you touch something, and then we all do this, right?
Yeah.
We all touch our face. We all touch our mouth. And I think in the beginning, a lot of us thought that that's how coronaviruses or SARS-CoV-2 was mostly transmitted. And over time, we learned that, yes, it can be transmitted that way, but it's primarily transmitted like when you cough or sneeze and it gets in the air. And that's why it took off like it did.
I can remember back last year, they're like, no, don't touch your face. That's all you want to do is touch your face. If somebody tells you, because I can remember like going to Walmart and grocery shopping and all that, just being out in public in like March and April. And like if you cough down the aisle, people would look at you.
Yeah.
Like, you need to get that shit under control.
Yeah.
They're going to kick you out of here.
If you look back at Facebook memories right now, this was when the big lockdown, we were big time lockdown right now because, I was like, I noticed a memory today and it was like, listen, if you have an older neighbor, check on them because, they may need something because people were scared to death of getting out because there was a month's time. Me and Michelle come back from New York right when this happened. And we were in New York in late February, I believe. And I come home and I had a freaking common cold. And everybody, oh my God, he's got the corona, And I didn't know. I did have COVID. I did find out later on, like this year in January. And all I was really tired. But I took Ivomec. What is your thoughts on that for the people that have done that? Because I've had people message me left and right about that.
I'm a scientist, so I look at the data. I just strictly look at the science, not a political viewpoint one way or another. I think there are studies in cell culture, like not in an animal, that show that it can slow down the virus's ability to grow. At the same time, I think you have to be careful putting something, taking something when you really don't know, a lot. It's used for horses and things like that, right? As it's an anti-parasite medication. And so I think without a lot of data in humans or in non-human primates or something, a good model for human disease, I think it's really hard to say if that really has a benefit or not. And I guess my concern would be you really don't know anything about the toxicity in humans. So if you keep, maybe one time isn't going to hurt, but if you keep taking that, what's that going to, is it going to have some kind of a side effect or some kind of a toxic effect?
I like carrots and oatmeal now, so I guess maybe it did. What are your thoughts on hydrochloroquine?
Again, I think there's some people. I think it's highly controversial. I don't think there's the scientific data right now. When you look at the trials that have been done in humans with hydrochloroquine, it doesn't look like it was very effective. But you can't. I think we have to be careful because people made it too political. And in the beginning, it was licensed for other indications. If it's not going to hurt you, I personally don't think there's something wrong with taking something if it as long as it doesn't harm you.
You're like taking a Tylenol.
Right.
I mean, it's not going to hurt you, so if you take it, it's not going to know its ill effects.
And I think in the beginning, everyone was trying to find something that worked, right? This was a pandemic, the likes of which no one had seen since 1918.
Yep.
So I think it's I don't like to be critical of anyone for trying to come up with ideas and trying to stop this thing, right?
Right.
Everybody's trying to do the right thing and trying to find cures and trying to do something. And there wasn't a lot of drugs in the beginning. There weren't things. We didn't know a lot about COVID. And so if you can find something off the shelf that would stop it and protect people, I think most of us as scientists would be all for that. And you just don't know in the beginning. So I think until we started getting a lot of data in. And now, now we know there are drugs. And so, because in my career as a virologist, I've never seen so much money thrown at anything and so many resources as COVID. And it honestly, it blows my mind how fast we came up, vaccines were developed and how fast treatments were developed. For example, you look at some of the antibodies. Well, there's a drug called remdesivir that was used for COVID, and looks like it certainly had some beneficial effects. Our lab, we were working on human monoclonal antibodies as a treatment. So this would be something you use if you already have COVID. Somebody comes into the hospital, they're diagnosed, or you come into the clinic or the hospital or whatever, and you're diagnosed with COVID. And if you look like you're going to develop severe COVID, you're a more severe case. We were working with a company called Eli Lilly, big drug company in the United States, and they developed several different antibodies. And there was another company, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, I think it might have been Regeneron, that also was developing monoclonal antibodies. And in the beginning, these were the antibodies that were used to treat a lot of the politicians. Trump got treated with one, not the Eli Lilly, but the other company. I think Chris Christie, Ben Carson, some of those were treated with these antibodies. So I think, again, while I'm not, I'm not going to criticize people for taking some of these other medications like hydrochloroquine or these different things. As the science progressed, as we had more time in the lab to study the virus, then you started seeing these more, proven in the lab treatments like remdesivir or the antibodies being used. But ultimately, the vaccines are, I'm a proponent of the vaccines. I realize that some people don't like taking vaccines, but I think that one of the things that concerns me, and I think President Trump deserves a lot of credit for this, is that I've never seen a vaccine go from development to licensure that quick in my life. You're talking 9 months.
Is that necessarily good? Are there going to be, is it safe? Or do we not know enough long term?
I think we know for those. I'm not going to speak about the other ones, but for Pfizer and Moderna, I think we know that they were doing clinical trials pretty much at the same time, that the outbreak was going on or the pandemic was going on. And so those two vaccines, to me, have pretty much been proven safe. Now, there's always going to be people that react to anything, right?
Right.
So, because some people that have allergies, right? People are allergic to all kinds of different things. So we're all genetically different, and you can have somebody that's completely healthy by all means, and they're not going to have a good reaction to some foreign product being put in their body. So I think when you look at the vaccines, you have to look at a large number of people, and because you're always going to, people die every year of the flu. People get the flu and people die,
right? And
people have bad reactions to it. And the same thing's going to happen with COVID. And the same thing's going to happen with the vaccine. But I think what I've seen with the Operation Warp Speed, that was amazing to me. We work on, my lab has worked on Ebola for, I've worked on Ebola for like 30 years. And it took, almost 20 years to get a licensed Ebola vaccine. And you look at COVID and you've got 2 licensed vaccines in 9 months. And,
right.
I'm used to seeing politicians always slow things down. It's always, I worked for the Army for 23 years, and when I lived back in West Virginia and worked in Maryland, and it would seem like you get into that swamp of D.C. and you get into that beltway, and it's both parts. This isn't even a political statement. It's just
it's a true fact.
We know.
It's just people. There's almost an incentive to slow things down.
Yeah, you can't. You can run on it again in 4 years.
And it's like, and it's just as a citizen, as a taxpayer, it's really frustrating because you see things that are just like, I don't see people like get up in the morning and we're going to intentionally do this, but it's quagmire. It's quick. It's just nothing moves fast. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is where Trump did a great job, not being really a typical politician, being a businessman. He comes in there and starts cutting red tape. And look, I'm not against, nobody wants to see something unsafe put into humans. And there's a reason we have the FDA, and it's a good thing. It's good that you test things, and nobody wants to see, especially, kids or something. You don't want to see,
right.
It could be your husband or your wife or your spouse or your kid that gets something foreign, a new drug or a new vaccine. You don't want to see anything bad happen. Nobody does. And so that does have to be regulated. I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is just a lot of times you can see over time, there's just too much regulation, over-regulation. And then it's just a thing where it becomes a career for people. It's just, it's incredibly slowed down. And, and we saw that with a lot of vaccines, there's great vaccines, and somebody makes one, and it just sits there on a shelf.
You said Ebola.
Yeah, Ebola.
Ebola took 20 years to get it licensed.
Yeah.
Let's just say however long it took.
Yeah.
How different is that vaccine 20 years ago that got licensed to the one y'all had 2 years?
Same vaccine.
Same vaccine. 18 years wasted, people dying over nothing.
Yeah, basically. I mean, but it wasn't a virus of public health.
It wasn't here.
It wasn't here, and there was also a small market for it. It was. I worked for the Army, and so before 9/11, we were working on Ebola because the Russians, the former Soviet Union, were developing Ebola and its sister virus Marburg as biological weapons. And so that's why we were working on it. We were trying to develop vaccines and treatments, to protect the warfighter, to protect our soldiers in case it was deployed against us. And after 9/11, the federal government, the Department of Defense, NIH, put a fair amount of money into biological defense. So the kinds of stuff that we were working on when I worked for the Army. So, there was a little bit more interest. And I think after 9/11, we realized, who in the heck ever thought you could hijack 4 airplanes and fly them into buildings? Mm-hmm. If you would have told me that 2 days before 9/11, I'd have told you were crazy.
Or 30 minutes before.
Right. And then so I think people started to think outside the box, and we realized that the people that want to do us harm have no value for human life.
Right.
These aren't people that sit around like us, and they have no value for human life. And so there was a fear then that these people were going to get a hold of something like Ebola and infect themselves and walk out into a population, or because terrorism became important then. It wasn't just that, some state sponsor is going to develop Ebola as a biological weapon and spray it in the air. The concern was more about terrorism because we saw with anthrax, like when they put anthrax in envelopes, it shut down our postal system and caused millions, if not billions of dollars of damage. And I think that's what terrorism, that's what terrorists want to accomplish.
To cause a problem.
And so with Ebola, we were working on it back then to try to, as both an agent of biological warfare and of terrorism. And, the government put a lot of money into developing vaccines and treatments. And so I remember one night, my buddy and I, Heinz Feldman, and it's really more his idea than mine, but we were sitting in a bar in Marburg, Germany, just like, shooting the shit, if I can say that.
Say whatever you want.
You say whatever you want here.
And 2:00 in the morning, we're drinking some beers, and one of our colleagues had kind of come up with a philosophy of how Ebola causes disease. They basically thought that endothelial cells are the cells that line your blood vessels. Mm-hmm. So if you think of it as a pipe, and the blood goes through the pipe, those are the cells that make up that pipe. And they were basically saying, well, the Ebola infects those cells, and it causes those cells to die, and then you bleed to death. That's kind of what the theory was, and we didn't believe that. And so he had taken one virus called Vesicular Stomatitis virus. It's similar to rabies. So if you think about it, it looks like a bullet, right? It looks like a bullet. And this virus was engineered so that you're using one virus to attack another. So what you're trying to do is to create a decoy, or you want to mimic something that you want to trick your immune system into thinking something's Ebola. So if you think about a bullet and it's got all these spikes on the surface of it, right? And we basically took the gene out that encodes those spikes, and you put the Ebola gene in there. So you have a virus that looks like rabies, so it looks like a bullet, but you got Ebola spikes on the surface. And the theory was that we were going to use that not as a vaccine originally. We were thinking, okay, if they're right, and they're saying that this surface protein of Ebola causes all this damage to your blood vessels, if we put that into animals, it'll do the same thing. And so we were sitting there, drinking beer, and this is a great idea. And he was working in Winnipeg, and they weren't allowed to. There's a biosafety level 4 lab, and if your audience has ever seen the movie E.T., remember the space suits, the blue suits. That's what we wear in the lab. And so, but they weren't allowed to work with monkeys at the time, and so I was working for the Army. So they sent what we're going to call a virus, but it's a vaccine, down to us, and we put it into monkeys, and it didn't do anything to them. And then we challenged the monkeys. So after we give them this bullet-shaped virus that has the Ebola proteins on the surface, and we're going to call it a vaccine now. We're just going to call it the VSV vaccine. It didn't do anything to the monkeys. So about a month later, we challenge them. We give them real Ebola virus, so they should have all died, and they all lived. And that's when we realized, hey, this would be a pretty damn good vaccine. And
you are definitely the smartest son of a bitch we've ever had on here.
And so we were like, this is really cool. And so we published it. Like, we in the outdoors, we have, magazines that are our favorites, like whatever they are, like different hunting magazines and stuff like that, American Hunter or Texas Trophy Hunters or whatever. And so we have this journal called Nature Medicine. So we published it in there and it made a big splash. And then we started doing other studies to see, and we can get away with just one shot. It's one shot and it works. And so then there's other questions: does it protect against different types of Ebola? We actually found out that you can give it almost right after you're exposed and still protect half the monkeys. And so we were doing all these studies, and the vaccine I was working for the Army. My buddy was working for the Public Health Agency of Canada, which is like their version of NIH, right? So we're both government employees, so we can't make any money on this, basically. And so the Canadian government actually filed a patent on it, but it just sat there. Nothing happened. It sat there, and in 2013 to 2016, I guess, 2014, 2015, when the Ebola outbreak took off in Africa. And of course, what's the first thing that happens here is that, when they landed in Dallas, I remember sitting there watching TV, and of course every major news station broke in when they brought Kent Brantley on the airplane from Africa to CDC or to Atlanta to Emory University to treat him. He was an American missionary who got Ebola, and they brought him home to the United States. But then when we had the case in Dallas, when the guy showed up off a commercial airliner in Dallas with Ebola, goes to the hospital, infects the nurses, it just blew sky high, and then it became an American problem. And, I remember we had, Senator Cornyn came to Galveston, to our lab. Governor Perry came. And all of a sudden there was a lot of, there was a ton of interest then. And I remember, Governor Perry, when he came to our lab, he asked me, he said, so, why don't we have, what's going on? You guys developed this vaccine. And I said, sir, it's just, there's no market for it. It's not like I'm making a drug for cancer, a drug that's going to cure heart disease, or even a flu vaccine, right? A company can go out, any company, entrepreneur can go out and come up with money and funding and people that are going to donate money and have investors in a company, or in big companies will go out and they'll buy, Merck and Wyeth and all these big, different Lilly. There's a lot of big drug companies in the U.S., Johnson & Johnson, that will go out and they'll buy the rights to these vaccines, but who's going to buy the rights to an Ebola vaccine when it affects a small population in Africa? Yeah. But then all of a sudden in 2014, 2015, 2016, there was a huge interest. So Merck actually, during that period of time, during the Ebola epidemic, 2014, 2015, they acquired the rights to the vaccine that my buddy and I developed, and that vaccine was licensed in December of 2019 for human use.
It was actually see no money from that.
None, not a dime.
But that's not unusual for anybody that develops something if you work for a different company. No, I'm not disagreeing with that, but that's pretty normal. If you work for Apple Computer and you design something on the iPhone, it's Apple owns that right.
Yeah, that's correct.
So you
Apple's
now,
not saving
but there's
lives.
drug guys that are chasing these drugs like your Viagras and stuff. They're trying to hit that lotto of hitting that one thing that.
Oh yeah.
And you have no interest of doing that on your own.
No, I mean, I think, don't get me wrong. I mean, we'd all like money, right?
Yes,
It'd be nice to make something, but I think, I've told so many people this because I've traveled the world. I've been everywhere. I've seen so many different things. And, I chose to make Albany home because it's the favorite place I've ever been in my life. When I drove into Albany the first day in the early 90s, I just knew that this is an amazing place. I would like to think when I retire, when it's all said and done, and I'm sitting out there, watching that West Texas sun. And we bought a ranch right next to Bucky, and when I'm sitting out there watching that West Texas sun go over, the Nail, and I'm watching that sun go down, I'm sipping on my bourbon, smoking a cigar. You want to feel like what you did mattered, right? You want to.
It did matter.
There's no amount of money. If we saved one kid's life, there's no amount of money.
How many millions of people have you saved in Africa?
I have no idea. Because that vaccine was used at the end of the outbreak, 2015, 2016, that was used in a number of the West African countries. They started vaccinating people. And then, I can't prove this, but, we know from the clinical trial data that the vaccine worked. We know that it worked. And it was proven that it worked in Africa, in real people, in that type of setting. And So it's hard to estimate how many people, were saved by that vaccine. And then earlier this year, and we've had several flare-ups of Ebola since that ended in 2016. There was one a couple months ago in Guinea, in Africa. So, every time there's been a little flare-up, that vaccine is brought in and they start vaccinating people. Because one of the things that's great about this vaccine is it works quickly. It works almost immediately in a couple days. It's because it's actually what we call a replication competent vaccine. So it actually grows in your body, but it's a limited infection. But it really tricks your body into thinking it's real Ebola, right? Your body thinks it's real Ebola and it's not. And so the great thing about that vaccine is you can bring it in quickly. So if you have an outbreak, what they do in Africa, let's say you have a cluster of cases and you find out who was in contact. So over this little village here, you got 5 people that got Ebola. So what they do then is they go in and they call it a ring vaccination. So they basically quarantine off that area. But then everybody that was in contact with those people gets vaccinated. Everybody who was in contact, like those people that were in contact, then you go one layer further, people that contacted those people are also vaccinated. And that's worked really effectively in stopping it.
That's amazing.
How is Ebola transmitted?
It's really not like COVID. So it's more body fluid. Mm-hmm. You have to really be close, but a lot of the cultural practices contribute to the in Africa contributed to the spread. So it's like when somebody dies and they have a funeral, everybody goes up and touches the body. You have all of these things, and of course, a little dab will do you. One virus particle for Ebola can create a productive infection. So that's one thing unique about Ebola is it takes a very small amount of virus. Where a lot of other viruses, it may take 100 particles or 1,000 particles or 10,000 particles to initiate a productive infection in your body and make you sick. Ebola only takes one. So it's not really transmitted through the air unless you've got maybe some blood and you sneeze that into somebody's face or something.
So how did the kid that came back to Dallas? How did he come in contact?
He was a
with
mission.
Ebola?
No, that was the guy in that went to that was the missionary that ended up in
Atlanta.
The guy that ended up in Dallas was he was just a guy. He was a citizen. He was an African person that was. He was native to, I think it was, I want to say Liberia or Nigeria. I can't remember off the top of my head. But he was just like any other person that was, commercial air travel. I mean, I guess he was visiting family or something in Dallas, and he just got on an airplane. And, people, in the beginning when you have Ebola, it's just like anything else. The symptoms are flu-like.
Right.
So he might not even have had symptoms when he got on the plane. He may have had symptoms. He may have had thought he had a cold or the flu or something, gets on an airplane, lands in Dallas, goes, and if you know the story, I mean, he went to the hospital and then they sent him home, and then he came back, a day or a couple days later.
Nobody's looking for Ebola.
With foam. Nobody's even
Dallas.
thinking about Ebola.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they're starting to see things, and then somebody made the smart decision to call some experts, and you better test that guy for Ebola. And all of a sudden, holy hell breaks loose, and then what happened then is the 2 nurses that were taking care of him came down with Ebola, and again because they're
just close enough contact.
Yeah, because they're cleaning up blood,
right.
They're cleaning up, urine, feces, that kind of stuff, and it's and again we all do this.
Sure.
What about I had a train of thought and I've lost it here for a second. With Ebola, y'all basically Ebola. I won't say it's cured, but y'all are controlling it big time.
Yeah, it's not cured, but it's we have a vaccine that works now, and if it's used, we don't know how long the vaccine lasts. So this is just like with COVID with the vaccine. So we don't know. We've done these studies in monkeys where we think it's good for 9 months to a year, but I can't tell you. If I vaccinate somebody tomorrow with Ebola, I can't tell you that 2 years from now they're still going to be protected.
But if they get it,
don't know.
You can get a shot and it'll go away.
Yes. I mean, what we would do now is if somebody, we probably wouldn't give somebody the vaccine now where we might have several years ago, because we have we have treatments now, we have drugs now that are really highly effective. There are several, monoclonal antibodies. These are human antibodies that are engineered in a laboratory, basically. And basically what you do is you take somebody that already had Ebola, that survived it. And that's a rare person. But you take those people that survived it, and you can use their blood cells, and their white blood cells, and you can use that to genetically engineer. You can basically manufacture. You figure out which ones are the best ones. So you can do this. We work in a space. We work in a laboratory where we work with Ebola. So you basically do tests with those cells, and you find out which you make basically a battery, a whole catalog of antibodies, and then you just screen them against the virus to see which ones work the best, and then you test those in animals to see which ones work the best. Eventually, monkeys, and we've got a number of them now that completely protect monkeys, and they started using those in humans a couple years ago, and they work pretty good in humans. So somebody could even walk in with Ebola. Now, if you walk in and you're like 6 hours from death, there's nothing in the world that's going to save you.
Right.
But somebody could walk in with Ebola and get these antibodies, and there's a good chance that you'd be okay.
What
How the fuck did you meet this guy? Just bought a place right next to you? And
No, he started hunting in 91.
91, 92, yeah.
Really?
You had a lot in common, didn't you, Bucky?
We talked for days.
I've known him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper.
So when AIDS basically has been wiped out.
Yeah, I mean, and it's taken a long time. I wouldn't say it's been wiped out, but it's been controlled.
When
Effectively controlled.
When I was in college, in my young years of having a lot of good times, that was a big scare, though.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's like, oh, shit. And then if you knew somebody that had AIDS, boy, don't touch him. Because we had a guy in Wichita Falls, the rumor was he had AIDS, and you'd see him at a bar or something, and you're like, somebody's got AIDS, you better stay away from him. I mean, there'd be a circle of 10 foot around him, nobody wanted to be around him. And then you found out that it didn't transmit unless you were doing
Naughty things.
Yeah. Well, you wasn't going to transmit it by just breathing the same air they were.
Right.
But everybody looked at it. Well, then we got the COVID, and then this first scare was it's going to wipe everybody out here. And then we found out that it's not near as deadly as they thought it was. And if you get it, I had it, and it didn't bother me none. I'm a poster child for everything you shouldn't be health wise. On the vaccine, you said you're a proponent of the
COVID vaccine.
the COVID vaccine. Did you have a vaccine?
Yes.
So you had it.
Yes.
Did you have any ill effects afterwards?
No. Nothing more than I would have had with a normal vaccine. I worked for the Army for 23 years, and we developed all kinds of treatments to protect the military, to protect the troops.
Right.
And because I had to work in certain types of laboratories, high containment laboratories with nasty things, we were required to take certain vaccines so that we could get into the laboratory. So I'm used to taking vaccines. And then, just growing up, you take flu or you take, polio vaccine. And to me, polio is a great vaccine.
Right.
And my dad grew up in a generation where a lot of the relatives, different people had polio, and it was one of the worst things you could ever imagine somebody having. That to me is one of the greatest examples of a vaccine doing great things. Smallpox is another one. I mean, it was terrible, for the world, and the vaccine basically wiped it off the planet of the earth.
How old are you?
I'm 58.
You're 5 years older than me, and I feel like I've accomplished absolutely fucking nothing in life now. But we grew up with polio, measles, all the vaccines we took.
Right.
And then we got this one thrown off us. I didn't take it because I got the deal, and I've read that 18 to 24 months if you've had it. And then I've read a deal the other day that said if you've got COVID, the chances of you getting it again are very, very, very slim. Is there much truth to that?
We don't know the answer to that question.
That's my other question then. Then how do we know that 5 years from now, everybody that took the COVID is not going to be sterile?
We don't know the answer to that question either.
Honest answer. I like that.
I think that this is the mistake. I'm not a politician. I'm a scientist, and we base science and decisions, or we have a hypothesis. So we propose that this is the reason something happens, and then we test that hypothesis, and it's either true or it's not. And one of the things with COVID is we can't even it's hard to test the hypothesis because it's too early in the game. So people that got the Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccine, all we know is that a lot of those people were 6 to 9 months into it right now. Very few of those people who got the vaccine have, I'm not going to say you couldn't get infected again, but very few of those people, it's rare that somebody gets severe COVID that's been vaccinated 6 to 9 months later. Now, 5 years later, 3 years later, I have no clue. And my guess is because we're all genetically different, everybody's going to react differently. Some people probably could get exposed maybe a year later and they could get severe COVID. Other people 3 years later and they're good.
Well, the flu vaccine, people have to take it every year.
Yeah,
but nobody goes and gets a flu vaccine and thinks, oh shit, something's going to go wrong. But it happens. They just don't publicize it all the time. Same with chicken pox. There's kids get chicken pox, and some people have an allergic reaction. Every day in the United States, some kid gets a chicken pox deal and has some kind of side effect.
Exactly.
But
Where is the chicken pox? I don't see that.
Where's it at?
No, there's a vaccine for it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But it's also what
Well, shit.
it's
So-
older
so
people
my
have the
kids aren't gonna
shingles.
get it.
Older people get shingles. It's like a long-term sequelae. But to me, this is the thing where I don't believe you force people to take vaccines. I think it's like I think there's and I wasn't a big proponent of lockdowns when they locked down things. I think what as scientists we tell the public, or people ask us questions and we answer those questions. I believe very strongly that the government, because the taxpayers pay a lot of money for people like me to do what I do. And I believe the government has a responsibility to be transparent and to let the public know what scientists like I are doing and show that data to the public and explain it to them in layman's terms. This is what I believe. And then I believe the public makes their own decisions based off of that information. I mean, I'm for personal responsibility. I believe that if you don't want to go to the store, don't go to the store. If you don't want to go to the restaurant, don't go to the restaurant.
Did you see the video the other day? It was Ted Cruz. He was walking up, and he didn't have a mask on. He was about to do a press conference, and the reporter's like, Senator Cruz, would you put your mask on, please? He said, well, number one, I've been vaccinated, so, like, And he's like, the press guy was like, well, it would just make us feel a lot better. He's like, you're free to take a couple steps back if I'm making you nervous. Like, personal responsibility.
Nobody in here is wearing a mask.
No.
And I don't think nothing of it. I don't wear a mask unless I have to. And we're in Texas where you don't have to wear one hardly ever. And I had a lady tell me the other day in town, I went into the post office and she goes, you're not wearing your mask. I said, and I'm not going to be. and I wasn't going to. Now, because I had it, I don't have it no more.
Yeah, and I think that every situation is unique, right? And I think it's different depending on, like, if you're going to get on a commercial airline where there's people are packed in like sardines versus us sitting out here in the middle of nowhere in West Texas, you can't treat everything the same.
Right.
Because everything's not the same. And I've never been a one-size-fits-all type person. I think that, Bucky and I arrived up here and we were talking about in the beginning about golf. And in the beginning, they're like, are you kidding me? You can't go outside and play golf? This is insane. I mean,
you can't go to the beach in California.
In Michigan, they weren't letting, the governor wasn't letting people go out on boats. Or
Yeah.
they were like, that's
the safest place you can
do.
be.
And like, what was great when COVID's, like you were saying, it was about a year ago. And I remember we would go over to Breckenridge to go to Walmart, and I've never seen so many people on the lake in my life. I mean, I didn't know there were that many bass boats in the Albany area.
They were living the freedom that they had.
And it's awesome, isn't it?
When the people would come here this year from out of states, they would come in and they'd be in the parking lot and nobody's wearing a mask, and you could see in their trucks like none of them are wearing a mask.
They'd kind of
You
wait
wouldn't
for
see
the
a
first
mask.
couple people to walk out. Like, are they wearing masks in there?
And no, they're not wearing a mask, so let's go. I got to fly Sunday and I got to wear a mask on a plane. I'm okay with that. That's their rules. I'm doing what they tell me to do. I'm going to do it. A friend of mine had a shot a couple of days ago, and he can't walk hardly. His knees are killing him.
Yeah.
And he tells me, he says, damn shot. I go, your knees? That's where they give you your fucking shot at. That's it. But that's one of the side effects he had, and he had the COVID pretty good.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I said, why'd you get a shot? You had it. He goes, well, we're going to visit some folks this week, and I don't want to, or next week, I don't want to get them it. I said, are you going to give them herpes? Well, I don't have herpes. I said, you don't have the COVID either. So why are you worried about giving it to them? I mean, you had it.
You're so old. I love the way you say the COVID. It's the COVID.
Okay, whatever it is. But
just COVID, not the
Again,
COVID.
I think
not
with your
YouTube.
situation you just described, I think, again, everybody's genetically different. So I'm going to react differently to the vaccine than Bucky is, or what all of us in this room may react exactly the same, and we all may have the same. I just got my arm got a little sore. It wasn't bad at all. It wasn't like any other vaccine I ever had in my life.
you had the 2-shot deal.
I had the 2-shot deal. I had the Pfizer.
I think he had the Johnson & Johnson, which is a 1-shot deal.
Yeah, and again, every vaccine is going to be different. Every person is going to react differently, and I think that this is where, as scientists, in the beginning, I like transparency. I like people just to be upfront and, explain to people up front that everybody's going to react differently, that some people may get sick, that some people may have nothing, some people may have no side effect at all. Some people may have fatigue. Some people, may get really ill. And that's just, but it's percentages. It's just like the people that have a very serious reaction to the vaccine is extremely small. But, I think we all go through life, and I'm not somebody that worries about everything that's going to happen, like, to me. Like, you could go out here on the highway and get run over by a semi, and I'm not going to sit here and think about the rest of my life worrying about something happening I can't control.
Yeah, that's why. When I had COVID, I was tired. This is the smartest freaking disease ever made by someone. I mean, some people are freaking tired. Some people have to be on ventilators. I mean, it hits you after 10 o'clock at bars in Michigan because they can be open till 10, but after 10, you got to close it down because that damn COVID's going to come through the door after 10. Do you think it's a man-made? Do you think it was man-made, or do you think it's a natural?
I don't know the answer to the question, honestly. I don't think it was intentionally made, but I'm not going to say that it couldn't have been escaped from a laboratory.
Right.
Because I think I think there's a lot of theories out there, and as scientists, again, we come up with a hypothesis, and you have to. And there was a great show. I don't watch CBS. I don't watch 60 Minutes, but I watched it Sunday night because there was a story on COVID, and I actually think they did a good job with it, where they presented the whole viewpoint of, did COVID come from bats or some kind of wildlife species that got into the wet markets in Wuhan, or did it escape from the laboratory in Wuhan? Because there is a high containment facility in Wuhan. And so, and I think one side of the argument is there's people saying, well, it must have come from nature because most of these viruses come from bats, or this is how it normally, these emerging viruses normally are transmitted from wildlife directly to humans. And so there's that argument. And then the counter argument that, I heard, Sunday was, and it has to be proven or disproven, is that what is basically, I guess the flip side is, what is the statistical probability that the virus emerges in a place that happens to have a lab that was working on viruses like that?
Right.
So basically, this laboratory was going out into the field because virologists, we study viruses, right? So they were going out into the field, into caves in China, and they were bringing the bats back to that laboratory. And the bats are what harbors SARS coronaviruses. So, I can't say, and I don't think anybody can definitively say that somebody in the lab, was working with was trying to recover a virus from a bat, what we call isolate a virus, or get a virus out of a bat, and then caught their own experiment, and then walked out into the public. I don't know the answer to that question. And I think that there's been several shows on that one Sunday where they were addressing that. What is the origin of COVID? How did it take off? And I think the one thing that both sides can agree on is that the Chinese government was not transparent.
No.
That, this perhaps potentially could have been stopped very early if they had been honest and candid and open.
Because when do they think it cropped up in China?
There's different theories now. I mean, originally I think everybody was saying December, but I've heard recently people were saying that as far back as September, October of 2019.
So they potentially kept the lid on it for 6 months.
But, who knows?
Right.
I read about it in December or January. This little area was no big deal though, but it was just a story.
Yeah.
I can remember we were kind of poking fun at it. When it first, you start hearing about it in December and January, and you're like, oh, watch out for the Chinese flu. And then
it's the greatest terror attack ever put on the world if it was done on purpose.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
the timing was impeccable for an election, for everything. Be political for a minute. Everything had to be done the way it worked out to have that ass clown we have in there now. I mean, I'm just telling you, that's what I'm going to tell you right now.
See, but I'm like you. I don't necessarily believe that it was manufactured to do what it did. I don't think you can.
I mean, I've worked with viruses my whole life. I don't think you can control them. I don't think you can predict how a virus is going to behave in a huge population like that to have been intentional. That's just my own viewpoint. But, what is really frustrating as a scientist, we like to figure things out. Mm-hmm. I like to know why something like Ebola. I want to know why is it so bad? Why is it so dangerous? Why is it so deadly? And so for COVID, it's like, I want to know how it got into the human population. What happened? I mean, and it's so frustrating because I don't know if we'll ever know the answer to that question, because you have people hiding. It was clear that they were not cooperating with the World Health Organization. It was clear that, as a scientist, if somebody, we try to be forthcoming and we try to share our data. I mean, we're proud of our data. We want people to know about our data. Yeah. And here you're seeing the exact opposite thing.
You've got to work in the most frustrating field in the world, though, to have to sit on something like the Ebola and sit on that for 20 years before it gets fixed to go. So I see where the warp speed by Trump makes you feel so good to see that, we can get and help people and get something done real fast.
Yeah.
So we're going to change it up just a little bit. Cancer. if they put the same work into cancer they did this, do you think they'd change a lot of the cancer stuff?
That's out of my area of expertise. I really wish, it's funny, we're all scientists, but we specialize just,
Right.
Right. And so that, I don't really want to comment too much on something where I'm not an expert, but what we saw with warp speed was mind-boggling. I mean, to me, as a virologist, totally mind-boggling how much incredible research and development was done at warp speed, right? Mm-hmm. And so it would be great. I would love to see something like that happen. And again, I'm not the expert to answer that question. Alzheimer's would be another one.
Yes. There's no money to be made in
healthy people.
In COVID, not the COVID, but COVID.
The COVID.
There's no money to be made there. I mean, everything's a free vaccine. The governments are taking it on the chin all around the world. Everybody's out of work. They're locked down. There's no economy. Cancer, on the other hand, if you cure cancer, you're going to cost somebody a lot of money.
Yeah.
A lot of money, because there's a lot of money on that other side that don't want cancer cured. I don't know if I say they don't want it cured, but there's a whole lot of profit for people being sick, going to the oncologist every day.
Yeah.
And the biggest hospitals you see in every town now are all oncology.
I sure hope that I hate to see stuff like that. And I think I don't know many people whose lives haven't been touched by cancer.
No, I don't either.
Sure.
I mean, my dad died from cancer, and I don't hardly know anybody that doesn't have a cancer story in their personal family. Yes. And, so even the people that would benefit, you would think would want to do something, right?
Yes, you would. But do they? I know my dad passed away in June this year from cancer. He had lung cancer and fought for a couple of years, but they were doing all this stuff to him, and it wasn't making no difference. And I told him, I said, Dad, there's nothing that they're going to do that's helping, but they want to keep you in these programs to do it. And the people that were at the oncology clinic were the greatest people in the world. What a place to work. I mean, it takes a special heart to work there. But sometimes I think that the people that are running them places or owning it, they want them dollars coming through there, and the only way to do it is build the shit out of your insurance company.
Yeah.
And I feel bad, but the doctors and stuff he dealt with were all great people. I don't think any of them.
All the people that I work with, all the medical doctors, and I work with a lot of medical doctors because of all the work I've done over the years on the viruses I work with, and these are great people. They give, the guy in Atlanta that had Ebola, Kent Brantley, that they saved, a friend of mine, she was one of the physicians that attended to him, and the hours she put in, that they put in to save his life, and the amount of time she put into it, that wasn't for fame, fortune, or anything.
No.
That was just incredible dedication, and I know these people. They're great, great people. And so I have so much respect for the medical community, the doctors, the nurses. I'm not a big fan of lawyers, I'll be honest with you.
Nobody is. That's why they're all in Washington, D.C. running our country.
So it's, it's hard to answer your question about the cancer, but yeah, I like it to see people with their heart in the right place, trying to do the right things, and for good of all of us.
Well, it'd be nice if they could ever do. I don't damn sure don't know much about cancer other than I think it's personalized. Every person's is different, and I don't know if they'll ever get a cure for it. But they definitely have changed the survival rate.
Oh my God!
For
compared
a long,
to
long time.
when I was growing up, yeah.
And Dr. Ben Carson's a good example of a doctor that I think's a great guy that's in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And I can name you a million of the mother bastards that are lawyers up there that ain't getting shit done, and he was a good guy.
Yeah, and that's what I'm about, people cutting. And again, getting back to your original question, man, I don't ever want to see corners cut, putting things into people that cause harm, and none of us do. But a lot of that red tape can be cut. Sure. A lot, and we saw with warp speed, a lot of that red tape was cut, point blank.
That's
black
business
and white.
in general with the government, though. Not everything. Spanish flu happened in 1918. Mm-hmm. Am I right?
Yep.
On the years? 1918, Spanish flu hit here. The Spanish flu, if it was today, with today's sanitary, the way we live and stuff, would it be near as bad as it was?
I don't think so, because you have a different, again, there's no certainty. We can't go back, and it's like I love sports, so it'd be like we always go back was who was better, right. Babe Ruth or Hank Aaron or Barry Bonds, and I think it's very difficult to go back in time and say, what exactly would have happened. But I think the medical care, we didn't have ventilators in 1918, in hospitals like we did. Look at how quick the ventilators were laid out by the administration. This was mind-blowing.
Yes, amazing.
I mean, amazing how fast things got put out there. And, so I think if you go back to 1918, and if you had the quality of medical care we have in this country right now, if you had ventilators, if you had, the technology to make vaccines in 9 months, I don't think it's hard to imagine that it would have been as bad as it was.
Would it have been a pandemic even?
It's hard to say. I don't know.
What is the difference between Spanish flu and just?
It's influenza. It's just
the flu that we have.
It's just the flu that we have.
So
again, I don't want to get too technical here, but there's like H5N1 is avian flu, H1N1. There's different species or types of flu, and Spanish flu is just another type of influenza.
Don't want to get technical. The man told us about these little rivets on this
Trying to do
board.
the best I can.
How do you figure? The only time I remember the microscope was in biology and cutting up a frog and shit. How do you see these little? I mean, that just is amazing.
So we have when I worked for the Army, one of the first things I did is I worked with an electron microscope, and it's a light microscope on steroids. I mean, so it's they're huge. They're huge instruments, and it uses an electron beam. And you can visualize viruses. So, if you remember, a lot of people have had high school biology class, right?
Yes.
And you have the little light microscope, and you're looking at something. There's a lens, and it's 10x, right? It's 10 times, 40 times, and you might have 100x objective with oil or whatever, so it's 100 times. And so you're looking at whatever you're looking at on your little slide there. An electron microscope, you're looking at something, 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 times.
Whew.
So you can see Ebola virus in an electron microscope. You can see SARS-CoV-2 in an electron microscope.
100,000.
Yeah.
Freaking Ray Charles could see that shit.
Where do they think, or do they know where Ebola originated from?
Yeah, bats.
Bats again.
Bats carry it.
We had a fucking bat in here the other day.
It's coming to get
With
you.
Wyman.
We had 2 of them. We've
Two bats.
never had a bat here ever. We had 2 of them.
It's funny. A lot of the nastiest viruses in the world are transmitted. Don't go killing bats. They're good. We need them for other things. But it's like a lot of the nastiest viruses in the world.
Andy wasn't getting within 8
I
foot
wasn't
of him.
gonna touch it.
He's a chicken
I wasn't
shit.
going to touch it. So, I mean, what happened with the bat? Somebody ingested it, or
Usually what happens in Africa, every country is a little different, or every situation with an emerging virus is a little different. But in Africa, what's happened with Ebola virus and its sister virus, Marburg virus, what we think is that, bats live in these caves, but they come out at night and they go in the forest and the tropical forest. And I think over time, as man has gone into Africa, there's more and the rainforests are getting, they're getting
Smaller.
smaller.
Decimated.
And there's more contact. You're seeing more of it over the years because there's more contact. And what happens is, in Africa, and I've been there several times, but I mean, bushmeat is very popular. They eat monkeys, And so what happens is, the bats are flying around the trees, and Ebola won't make a bat sick. They just carry it. Okay. And so if the bat basically, the feces, they're going to be on the leaves and stuff like that. And the monkeys, they might be on fruit. So you may have a situation where there's a fruit tree. The bat takes a crap on the fruit. The monkey comes by, eats that, gets sick. And it's just like any other wildlife. I mean, coyotes catch deer that are hurt or wounded or sick a lot. So you got a monkey that's sick, that's dying, and it's easier for the hunters to get that. So the hunters kill that monkey, and then they take it back and butcher it. What do you do when you butcher stuff? I mean, a lot of us will wear plastic gloves here, and we got a deer, but a lot of us won't. I'm still old school, and so they're getting blood on your hands, and they get little small cuts and stuff like that, and then. It only takes 1 or 2 people, they get infected with Ebola, they go back to their house, they get everybody in their house, and all of a sudden, you have an Ebola outbreak. And it's kind of the same thing there's a virus, if you've ever seen the movie Contagion, it was based on a virus called Nipah virus. And Nipah virus happens in Bangladesh, India, Malaysia, that part of the world. And it's very deadly. It'll kill, 70 to 90% of the people it infects will die. That one's scary. We're worried about that one a little bit like COVID because it can be transmitted through the air. So if that takes off, that would
No, Andy's already nervous, Nancy.
So this one, what happens here is that bats carry it.
Of course.
Yeah, you're fucked.
Of course.
Bats carry it. And what happens is one of the popular things over there is date palm sap. So they'll have these big palm trees and they'll put taps in them to get the date palm sap out. Like we'd have a maple tree or something, right? And get maple syrup. And so the bats take a crap in that and then gets into the syrup. The humans eat it. And then
date palm syrup.
People just
date
need to
palm
not
sap.
fucking leave their countries. This would all be mitigated if people just stayed at home.
So
You won't even eat a monkey.
Well, hell no, I'm not eating a monkey. They
Would you
carry
eat a monkey?
Ebola.
I don't know that I would, but I've eaten oysters. There
You
ain't
don't even
nothing
eat a
nastier.
duck, but you'd eat a monkey.
Well, monkey probably tastes better than a duck does. but what my point is, though, Andy's scoffing at them eating a monkey. We'll eat a
I'm
fucking
not
oyster.
scoffing. I did
I
not
love
scoff
oysters.
at all. I was agreeing.
I love oysters.
I do too, but I'm saying
I
there
love
ain't a
oysters.
nastier thing
Yeah.
in the world. That's the
Yeah, that's
toilet
it's a
bowl
garbage
of the
filter, yeah.
of the freaking Gulf of Mexico.
I didn't scoff, Jeff.
Yeah, you did.
People are different in different parts of the region. If they would just fucking stay there and not bring their shit over to me.
But that made a lot of sense. I never had thought about that, but it all is just a big timeline there, from a bat shitting on a piece of fruit to a monkey to someone eating a monkey.
Yeah. And
Did AIDS really happen from people having sex with monkeys, or is that just a rumor?
I think I don't know the answer to that. I really
That's a safe way of saying it might be.
There's evidence that it was, but we can't prove it.
But yes, but a lot of these viruses come from bats, and it's just the contact, people, and they eat bats. I mean, go to like Africa, they eat bats.
Yeah,
It's a good thing Ozzy Osbourne. I'd stay away from his
No
ass.
kidding.
yeah. He's got immunities to this. He got that back in the '80s, but bats are the root of all evil.
Now, I want to be personal now on you. Not nothing bad or nothing, but how does a guy become a virologist from West Virginia?
Yeah,
now,
so-
not that West Virginia is backwards or nothing.
I'm kind of curious. Too.
I lived
I've never heard
in
this
the
before.
eastern part of West Virginia, and it's kind of hard for y'all in Texas, right? So y'all can drive all day long, and you're still in Texas, right?
Right.
All day long, and you're still in Texas. So I grew up in an area where Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland all come together around Shepherdstown, West Virginia, Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. So I would literally drive. Sometimes I'd drive straight across into Maryland to go to work from Shepherdstown, or sometimes I'd go down along the Shenandoah River, cross that into Virginia, and then cross the Potomac River into Maryland. And so I worked for the Army. It was about, it took me maybe 40 minutes to get to work.
No, but how did you?
My dad was a building engineer at the BL4 lab, and there's only a couple of them in the world. Back in when I started working there in 1985, there were only the CDC in Atlanta, Georgia, the Russians had one, and we had one at Fort Detrick, but there were only 3 in the world. And there might have been one in Germany. There was a couple others, but there weren't many. Mm-hmm. And so my dad was basically the building engineer there, right? So, that's the person that makes everything go, because you have to have special air filtration and handling. This
Right.
it's a BL4 lab is like a box within a box, and it's built that way so that the virus doesn't get out. So it's multiple layers of safety, right? So my dad was a building engineer there, and I played sports growing up in small town, and played baseball and thought I was pretty good, and went to D3 college and realized I stunk. And then I started I was always good at science. It always came naturally to me. All of my classes in high school, science, biology, things like that was the only one I didn't have to study for. Mm-hmm. And so, I get done my bachelor's degree, and I'm still living at home, and my dad's puts his arms son, you got to get a job. I can find you a job. And so I started working for the Army and was working on my master's and was thinking about doing a PhD. And then in 1980, so I was working in an electron microscopy lab. Remember I was telling you about that instrument that can see a virus at 100,000 100,000 times normal. I was working in that lab, and in 1989 there was that outbreak. You've heard of I don't know if you've heard of the hot zone about Ebola, where they got in this monkey colony in D.C. There's a movie about it. The movie Outbreak was loosely based on it, but that was loosely based
Planet
on
of the Apes.
But anyway, they had these monkeys dying down there, and they sent the samples up to us. So I'm the one that discovered that virus. It's a species of Ebola that doesn't cause disease in humans but wipes out monkeys. And it was in a facility in Reston, Virginia. Reston, Virginia is 30 miles from D.C.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't grow up wanting to be a lifesaver. You saved a continent.
It just happened.
They ought to send you some freaking money from Africa. Has anybody from Africa told you thank you yet?
Yeah, they have. And it's the greatest thing when you go there is the kids. You see the little kids.
That's horrible the way they grow up too.
Well,
Yeah,
and it's not Ebola is a pretty horrendous death.
Yeah, it's not the way you want to go.
Tell
you
them,
bleed to death.
tell them what your first thought was whenever you looked under that microscope that day when you discovered that.
Oh, it was one of those holy shit moments. It was we had worked with the virus in the lab that we were working with that virus. We thought it was a different virus. We thought it was a virus called simian hemorrhagic fever virus that just kills monkeys and doesn't do anything.
Say that again.
We thought it was a virus called simian hemorrhagic fever virus
Simian hemorrhagic.
Yeah, so it's
You
a
hemorrhage to death.
it's a virus that causes hemorrhagic disease in monkeys, but not humans.
You just bleed to death. They bleed out.
Yeah, and so we were working in a regular lab without spacesuits on,
Yeah.
and so we're in there.
Was Joan with you?
Yes.
Yeah, his wife is a scientist.
My wife and I were working in there, and my boss.
Your wife is also.
Yeah, she runs my lab.
Yeah, she's the big
She's
one.
as crazy as I am. And we were in there working. So basically, you take a virus and before you try to look at it in a microscope, you try to amplify it. So you put it in something where it grows faster, so that you can see enough of it to look at. So we were in there just like, and my boss comes in, and so basically you have a layer of cells on like a dish, and it's in a plastic thing called a plastic flask. You put it in an incubator, like a CO2 incubator, and you let it grow. And so my boss comes in, and we're looking at this under a regular microscope right now, because you can see that the cells are dying. You can just tell that they're sloughing off the surface. And so something's going on. So that's a good reason that we look at an electron microscope to try to figure out what the hell it is, right? So my boss comes in, he's Peter Jarling is being the boss, and he's trying to show me something. So he comes in, and he pulls the flask out of the incubator, and he takes the cap off, and he starts smelling it. And he said, see, and he's going like this, and he goes, this is an old microbiological technique, and if it smells like grape juice, it's you have contamination of your culture. Like you weren't clean in your technique, and you contaminated it with a bacteria, right? So he's trying to explain this to me. He said, here, smell this.
Getting a big whiff of it.
Yeah. And so as soon as I see that in the microscope, and I realize it's like Ebola or Marburg. I didn't know if it was Ebola or Marburg, but I knew it was bad. It was one of those viruses because they look exactly alike.
Better take you some nasal spray, son.
I'm like, oh shit.
So what did y'all do for precautions?
Well, we just monitored
waited?
ourselves for well, we went and told his boss, and of course everybody thinks this can't be possible.
Sure.
Everybody's thinking there's no way this is real. And we're like, but we're working they think it's a contamination of some kind, but we're like, it can't be contamination because we're working in with this virus in a lab that doesn't even have this virus. It's not in the spacesuit lab. There's no way, and so then we had to go back to the monkey tissues, and I had to put that in the microscope and prove that it really was in the actual monkey tissues. The liver that came. I basically had to go get the liver from the monkey that died and put that in the microscope and show that it was in the actual liver.
So, and at this time, you working for the Army. You're not in the Army.
I'm
but
not
you're
in the
working
Army.
for
I'm a civilian working for the Army.
So you're smarter than all your bosses. At this time. My son's in the Army, so I hear about this. Kind of stuff.
There's some great people.
But that is true though.
Yeah.
You've got guys that are over you that absolutely have no idea unless what you tell them what's going on.
Some of them, it's funny how when I was growing up, we had like some guys. C.J. Peters, a world-class virologist. We had some guys in the Army that were like crazy great. They were mentors of mine, taught me everything. They taught me a lot about what I know, and. It was funny because CJ, he was my boss's boss, and you take at the time, it's all digital now, right? Everything's digital now, but we had old film, like just film back then, and they had these like 3x4 negatives, like pieces of film, and so I had to go into the dark room, take all these pictures, get the film out of the electron microscope, go in, develop this stuff, and then make 8x10 glossy, suitable for framing, right? And so I'm taking them, and so we take them in, my boss. We take him in to his boss, or his boss comes in his office, and we're throwing these out, and he goes, this is funny, guys. And he looks at me and he says, Geisbert, if this is a joke, you're fired.
That's amazing. It's what a life you've lived.
I mean, to end up in Albany, Texas.
Yeah, that tells you right there smart people move to Texas. Either from Texas or the smart ones move to Texas.
So now, being that you work in a spacesuit, how much do masks help in decreasing the transmission?
There's mixed opinions on it. I think you have to wear it properly. When we work in what we call a BL3 lab with COVID, we wear an N95, and you have to have it fitted to your face because you see, like, if it's not properly fitted.
99% of the people are wearing their mask wrong.
Exactly. Don't you love the ones that have their nose hanging out?
That's the way mine is right
well,
here.
And it's just, when they said face covering, I mean, now you've got a bandana is technically face covering. Like, how much are these face coverings?
I think in the beginning, I think it's clear it works.
Right.
But it's like, it's really more so that if I'm standing here and you're standing there, and I sneeze, right, and I have something on, it's not that it's going to block every particle, right? It's that it's going to shorten the distance. Like it's going to,
right.
It's going to
won't travel.
I'm not going to go 10 foot. It might go 3 foot.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not hurting anything.
No.
I mean, that's the deal. Mine looks like a thong I mean, it looks like a damn thong kind of sort with the leg stuck out of it. And
You and Lou?
yeah.
But you know, I think we run this balance as a society too. I mean, you want to protect, and I think what Florida did, what DeSantis did in Florida is amazing, right? You look at this guy. I'm truly amazed because they should have been the worst. He's got probably the most elderly population. I'm guessing over 65 or 70. That's a dumpster fire waiting to happen, right? I mean, but the smart, like common sense. Bucky and I were saying this on the way up. Common sense goes a long way.
Yeah,
you can't preach common sense anymore. And I think what he did. Okay, we're going to protect the elderly, right? They're the at-risk people. And we know that people that have pre-existing conditions are more at risk. We know that elderly populations are more at risk. So protect them. Don't put people with COVID in with them. You know, isolate them, protect them, and then let the younger, healthier people. You don't shut the whole economy down. I mean, and then I think one of the things that we've underestimated, and you look at across the country, and then people, mental health, and. You know, things like, are people getting screened for cancer and heart? I mean, you know, we shut hospitals down for a long time.
The deal in Florida, what's crazy is their numbers are smaller than California's, which the communist people out there, they've got everything locked down completely. Well, Florida's living and everything's like you said. And they've also got a high population of minorities. And I've read that minorities are a lot more apt to have COVID or have a bad version of COVID. Have you?
I've heard. I haven't seen the data for that. And as a scientist, I'm all about data. Show me the data, prove it. I mean, that's what it looks like. I mean, certainly there's different reasons for all of these things, but I'm just stunned. I mean, if you were going to predict, you would predict that Florida would be bad.
Yes.
Just based off of the demographics of Florida. You would guess if I'm a bettor, gambler, I would bet that Florida would be among the 2 or 3 worst states in the country, and they're not.
What's bad is we went 15 days lockdown, and then when summer gets here, we're going to have it's warm weather, vitamin D, everybody will be perfect. Well, that didn't help.
Did you know that was going to be horse shit? Whenever they were saying 6 weeks to stop the spread,
and honestly, I'm not afraid to admit when I'm wrong.
Right.
And in trying to be like. In the beginning, I remember in the very beginning, I thought because I'm looking at this wrong. I mean, I'm looking at this like a coronavirus. Like as a virologist, you go back and you take from the knowledge you have about other things that are very similar, just like we would in any other thing, you know. And so if you look back historically at coronaviruses that caused the common cold or caused SARS, they're not super stable. And so I really thought that as we got into the warmer months, because I think what happens, we're all thinking it's mainly transmitted by touching and doing this because that's the way a lot of the common colds are transmitted. And I think where the mistakes were made and where a lot of people were wrong was that, as we talked earlier, it's much more airborne. And when you have a virus that's much more airborne, the temperature's not going to matter as much because it doesn't matter how long it sits on that surface. It's in your body, and it's when you sneeze or cough, it's out there.
You ever think we'll be normal again?
Yeah.
You do?
I don't know when.
2044 or something?
I don't know when. I mean, look at the rate we were going at with it. And I think it's going to boil down to what's the durability of the immune response. In other words, how long, whether you got it naturally or whether you were vaccinated, how long does that last, right? I think that, the longer that lasts, the more likely we will get back to normal sooner.
If 18 to 24 months is the deal, that ought to be enough to get things.
That would and honestly, and again, because I do vaccines and I do science for a living, I don't always take the flu vaccine every year, but it depends on the year and it depends on what mood I'm in and it depends if I'm already over there at the place getting the shots, right? Because I have to get a physical a lot, and so if I'm already over there and they're handed out, I'm already sitting here, right? What the heck? So I think it's just one of those things where and this is a different virus than flu. So it's, in my opinion, unless it mutates better or more efficiently than it has so far, I think it could be a chance where the vaccines now, these new the mRNA vaccines can be changed and tailored relatively quickly and swapped out. So if there's a variant that pops up, you can probably make a new vaccine more quickly than we can ever imagine before. So I think that it's. I'm just speculating here. I don't know for sure, and I'm not even going to try to tell you I know for sure. But it would be great maybe if we could get to a point where it was like the flu, where you get a vaccine, or a large part of the population gets a vaccine once every 2 years or something, and then we get back to normal. And I think a lot of us would be okay with that.
Yeah, I could live with that. I know that baseball is going to be a big factor in this because the baseball's fixing to start, and they're going to open up to full crowds. The NFL added an extra game this year, so they're going to have people in the crowd all year long. So I think it's a good deal. But what scares me is now they're talking about the strain number 2 coming, and the people in charge, I'm scared, are going to want to shut stuff down because it's about control and instead of doing what they say. If they would get the American public would feel so much better if they would get someone up there with some common sense to come speak to them like you have been and say, hey, this is what we're dealing with. Boom. Instead of talking around you all the time or acting like you're too stupid to make your own decisions.
Sorry to talk over you. I'm a huge believer in just being transparent and honest and giving the facts. And then you, the public, ask questions.
Yeah.
Force us to answer your questions in layman's terms and simplify some of these things, and not talk down to people, but engage people. And have an open discussion about this and explain and tell it. And if we don't know something, tell you we don't know it. But like you ask a question earlier about the variants or these different types that are popping up, and I can just tell you today it could change tomorrow.
Right.
But right now, today, from the data that's been published, from the data that's out there that's been then peer reviewed, that other scientists have looked at and said solid, and that's what we do as a field. Anytime somebody comes up, you do an experiment and you present your data, we always have it peer reviewed by people that are that are experts also, and not your best friend, somebody that's objective about it and can look at it objectively and say, yes, that's good science. And so to me, what we've seen so far with the variants and what's been published and what's out there is it looks like at least Pfizer and Moderna will protect against the variant. Now, some of the treatments might not work as good, but the vaccines will. Now, a new variant could pop up tomorrow, and so you always have to be ready for that. But I think, again, this is what I think Warp Speed taught us, is that you can make changes and you can make vaccines relatively with these new technologies, that you can get stuff out there. So if there's a new variant that pops up 3 months from now, and the current Moderna and Pfizer won't work, you can take the sequences, the genomic sequences of the new variant, and put it into that technology and just do the same thing you just did.
It's an amazing deal. What do they make the vaccine out of? I mean, it's a fluid, but does it have water in it? What is it?
No. Basically, what it is it's basically every vaccine is different. And the Johnson & Johnson that you just talked about is totally different than the Moderna. The Moderna and the Pfizer are almost identical. They're very similar. So it's just a little piece. It's a little protein. It's a piece of genetic material. And what it does is I'm trying to explain this. It'd be like a recipe. It'd be like a recipe for how to make something.
But what, I mean, you said protein.
It's just a little protein. But what's going to happen is if I put that genetic material into your bloodstream directly, there's things in your blood that are going to degrade it and break it apart. So it's funny because one of the companies, Moderna, actually took the technology that we were actually working on for something else with one of our collaborating companies called Arbutus to make it. But it's little tiny fat droplets.
It's fat droplets.
They package it in little tiny fat droplets. So if you had a
Jeff, you could save lives.
If you
I'm thinking about selling this stuff
Jeff
by the
could save
pound.
the world.
If you had a shake, if I took a salt shaker and poured it out all over this table, and you think about those little tiny salt, just think about those instead of salt as being little fat particles.
Okay.
And I put a little piece of genetic material inside of each one of those, right? And then I put that into your bloodstream. I inject that into your arm, and it's going to go from your arm. It's going to get into your muscle. It's going to get the little tiny blood vessels and take it all over your body, and it's going to take it into your spleen and places that really have, in your lymph nodes, places that generate the immune response so that you can fight it. But what happens is that little lipid, where normally that little piece of protein or that little genetic piece would degrade or would break apart, because your body's going to see that as foreign. It's going to attack it. But what happens is that fat droplet protects it, and then cells in your body will take that up, and once it's in those cells, that little piece of genetic material will come out, and it'll basically tell that cell to make a coronavirus spike protein, and all it's going to make is that coronavirus spike protein, and that's what your body thinks it's the real coronavirus.
But when you get a shot, it's clear. It looks like water.
Yeah. Oh, it's just a delivery. It's just saline.
Saline is what it
Yeah.
is. So that stuff's in the saline now.
Yeah.
Okay.
What was the first vaccine to hit the global market?
Oh man, that's before my time. You're probably back to pox or something, like smallpox or something like that. Was some of the first ones.
So where was the inspiration? Like, hey, let's try to make the body think that it has smallpox.
The guy proved his own experiment. There's smallpox. Obviously, was a really nasty virus that wiped out.
They cut it out of your skin, didn't they?
Well, it was just there's no way to get rid of it. I mean, it had a high mortality rate, and basically there was a virus that's very similar to smallpox, but didn't cause smallpox. And the guy basically that developed that, nobody would. How do you prove it, right?
Yeah.
So, and basically he injected it into his own arm, and then exposed himself to smallpox. And that's how the concept came about.
But didn't they cut out cultures out of people that had it, and that's how they done his?
Yeah. And they took him out of I think they took him out of cows or something, like the pox lesions, because there's going to be pox in those lesions.
And it was in the 1700s when they did that.
Yeah, this is old technology when people prove that this goes back.
That's what's crazy.
We catch that bat, buddy. You can
How was
trade your own
smallpox?
shit.
Tell me, smallpox came from bats.
No,
Thank God. How would it come?
it came from humans.
But the new bad stuff is what he told you they're worried about over in India. And there's not a more unsanitary place in the world than that area that you talked about.
Bangladesh, India, Malaysia.
They shit and drink out of the same fucking river.
Smallpox came from people.
Yeah,
It was just a genetic mutation.
Yeah, and like in Africa, monkeypox. Like there's a disease called monkeypox that's really close to smallpox, and monkeys carry it.
Now,
it's bad in St. Lucia where you're fixing to go in October. It's just bad as that. I'm telling you. You're going in a bad spot with bad monkeys, Andy.
sons of bitches.
And bats. Bats are bad in St. Lucia, too.
Oh, I'm sure of that.
They are.
See, now I'm thinking about maybe where did this rumor about the coronavirus making people sterile, where does that prop up from?
I have no idea.
Jeff Stanfield.
Well, I know that, but it's just Facebook. I think there's too much information out there.
I'm going to tell you right now, if that is true, there's a lot of big cities could use some sterilization.
I'm going to take it so that I don't have to go under the knife here pretty soon.
It wouldn't be a bad thing for some spots, but that is something that people are worried about. Why? I have no idea. I'm telling you right now, if you had to face me with going blind, limbs falling off, or being sterile would be the first thing I'd check off. You bet.
Yeah. No, we're done having kids, so it's like vasectomy city for me here pretty soon. So I'm thinking about just getting the coronavirus vaccination.
Put some sperm in the freezer to all you young guys, and then have at it. But you don't think that's really an issue going to be?
Again, I haven't.
I'm putting you on the spot here.
I don't know. I haven't seen scientific data. I do not think that's going to be an issue.
I mean, that would be something that would affect. I can't imagine 5 years down the road it all of a sudden working that way.
No, I don't see that happening at all. And there's no evidence. And again, I'm all about scientific data, evidence, prove it.
Your kids must have loved you.
Him and his wife are the same, so their kids couldn't argue with him even.
Bring your kid wants something like really bad, and you're like, explain
She's
why.
way tougher than he is.
Oh yeah.
How is that nice to have? Like you can come home and kind of bounce ideas off of her.
Nobody
you try
else
to keep
would,
her out of
because
the
of the hours we keep. Nobody else would tolerate me, and she understands what it's like and the out we have to check them like monkeys. Obviously, there's a lot of ethical issues, and there should be. But it's like we have to go
Grab
in
me a beer, Jeff.
at all kinds of crazy hours and check them, and 5 in the morning, 10 at night, all this kind of stuff.
You're constantly having to monitor the monkey that you.
I don't know a
injected.
lot of women that would be real crazy about that.
Well, and it's got to be nice, like intellectually. Like if you'd have married a stripper, like you can't really bounce a whole lot of like novel ideas on how to combat Ebola off of pixie dust, stripper dust.
I mean, and it's funny about just life. I mean, my wife is my best friend.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's nice to have somebody to bounce ideas off of.
Not that, Jeff. I'm not a Mexican. There's Coors Light in that same refrigerator.
There's not either. There's Michelob.
No, there's not in the left side.
You want a Bush NA?
No, I appreciate it. I trust me. Some of these ideas are way over my head, so I need a little bit of. When this was popping off, did you have like Tom on the phone? Like, hey, how worried do we really need to be?
We talked one night, and I just asked him. He's like, use your head, common sense, and just keep living your life.
See, and I think that's what's gotten lost in all this is common sense seems to be everybody's looking for government to come up with an answer, and just common sense. If you're worried about it, don't go within 6 feet of people.
Exactly. That's my thing. It's like I think, look, masks are going to help. There's no question about it. There's different things that are going to help, and there's different. But you know, to me, it's about educating people, and I think scientists like myself need to do things like this and come out and talk to people and just be honest and tell the truth and let people make decisions. Right? I mean. I look at just Albany and the high school kids, and I feel so sorry for, like, you know, this is probably the best baseball team Albany's had in years. Like,
yeah.
And then for those kids to lose the senior season.
Last year.
Last year.
And it was just so sad to watch, right?
Yeah. I'm on the school board here, and just hearing the story. So we did a survey because Texas, you know, they lifted the mask mandate, but TEA said we're going to go by CDC guidelines. So if somebody comes down with COVID in the classroom and they're not wearing masks, they're subject to quarantine. Well, it's kind of like, you know, we got 8 weeks of school left. Should we just buckle down and make them wear the mask the rest of the way? So, but it's just the teachers have talked about how much friction it has caused between them and the students because it's constantly pull your mask up. It's got to be over your nose. Don't use it as a slingshot. Don't hit them in the head with it. So just hearing the problems that the mask has caused in the high school. And, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but young kids, high school kids, they're not the at-risk.
Very rare. I mean, you talk about the population under 18 years of age is almost, I mean, you can't say immune because you always have, again, we have to talk about outliers in science all the time. But the at-risk is almost zero. I mean, it hasn't been a problem. Thank God.
Yeah.
You know, it hasn't been a problem for young people. And, you know, you hate to see schools closed down. You know, I guess I'm old school. You know, I believe kids belong in school. And
they do.
And virtual learning has its place. Zoom, I wish I would have bought stock in Zoom. You know,
Wow.
Back in February of last year. You know, and I think there's a place for everything, but I think that there's nothing like the interaction between, you know, a teacher and a student. And even for me, I mean, my students are graduate students in a lab, but it's not the same on a Zoom call. And I think you forget how much, you know, I work in a spacesuit a lot, so you learn how to read lips.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, anybody who's worked with me a long time, we literally, you know, everybody talks about, I don't want somebody shouting in the radio in my ear when I got a needle on an Ebola-infected monkey. Hey, Tom! You know, no. So, you know, we don't have radios or anything like that. We just talk like we're talking here. We talk a little louder. But it amazes me how long I've done this and how you really read facial expression and lips and, you know, and stuff like this. And when you got a mask on, you know, I've had several meetings we've had in everybody's distance, and you got masks on, and it's really hard to read people. And I didn't realize how much I look at expression and just, you know, if I'm not sure what somebody said, I'm putting the sound with the lip movement.
Right. I'm that way at restaurants, bad. And for some reason, last time we ate out, I guess everybody's wearing masks, but it's just I can't understand what you're saying to me. Yeah. Please take the mask off. You're not going to infect me. I'm fine. Take it off. But
you said the monkeys. The people out there, the animal tree huggers and stuff, don't realize how many lives monkeys have saved.
Oh, millions.
Yeah. And but they always went, oh, them poor monkeys. Well,
no, and you know, I'm all about ethics and research. I mean, I think you have to have a strong scientific justification. You shouldn't be able to just go
inject them with whatever.
Exactly. And this is why we have review boards. We have scientific review boards. We have what we call institution animal care and use committees. And it should be stringent. You shouldn't be able to just go, you know, do something like that. But if you have a justifiable reason, like I can't think of a better reason than the Ebola vaccine, right?
Yes.
I mean, I can't possibly think of a better, you're not going to, you know, how would you ever do that, right? And so I think that, you know, as long as it's done ethically and humanely, all of these vaccines and treatments for a lot of the infectious diseases and cancer, you know, that was all tested in animals first.
Mm-hmm. Do y'all? Is it chimpanzees, the monkeys y'all use?
We don't use chimpanzees. We use macaques and African green monkeys. So
are they smaller?
For Ebola, we mostly use rhesus macaques and cynomolgus macaques.
Are they mean?
They can be mean.
Yeah, monkeys I've dealt with.
So how do you? What's the process? And you can drag. I think your microphone's kind of raising up a little bit as we. No, you're fine. It sounds fine, but you can just drag it and push it down a little bit as we hit the table. I think it raises up. So what's the process on the monkey? Do you just glove up and go in and try to tackle the son of a bitch, or
no? They have special cages, so it has this false back, a squeeze mechanism.
Yeah.
So they're in a cage, and you basically pin them, and then you give them an injection of anesthesia.
So you're not grabbing the monkey and
you grab it. You have to put it out of the cage, but after it's under anesthesia.
Oh, okay.
So it would be like, we use a drug called ketamine, and it basically immobilizes the animal, and then you can safely remove it from the cage.
Ketamine?
Ketamine.
That's like Michael Jackson sleep medicine.
A lot of people are taking that now, I think.
Oh, when I worked for the Army, we had it's a controlled substance because people will people will take it, and I don't know why you'd ever do it because you can't
What does it do to you? It just immobilizes you.
It immobilizes your muscles.
But you're still awake.
Yeah, and you slobber.
I saw somebody in court like that not recently. Yeah, some Bud Light or some ketamine. Hell, let's do ketamine.
I can't imagine why anybody would ever take it.
I've heard of people taking it.
It's a big thing right now too.
Yeah, ketamine.
I just saw they had a big a big smuggle in New York City.
Yeah, I can't imagine why anybody would want to do that. It's insane, but
Why would you want to take meth? Same thing.
That's crazy.
So then you inject the monkey with whatever Ebola.
Well, yeah, and let's say we're testing the vaccine. Well, the first thing we do is vaccinate it. And then we, just like you would a person, right? And then you would, we might anesthetize it a couple times to take samples because we want to also understand the immune response. We want to understand why the vaccine works or doesn't work, so that we can, if it doesn't work, we want to make it so it works, right? And if it does work, maybe we can make it better.
Right.
So we want to learn about it. And then let's say a month later or whenever we decide, then we will expose the monkeys to whatever agent it would be, Ebola, COVID, whatever, to see if they're protected. And then we would, after we expose them to the agent, to the virus, then at certain times after exposure, we would anesthetize them and take blood samples so that we can, again, study the whole process to see how well they were protected. I mean, our goal is always to make the best, the best vaccine or the best treatment we can possibly make.
So after Ebola, what are y'all going to work on?
We're still working on Ebola because we're trying to make things better. And again, like we talked earlier, we don't know how long the vaccine lasts. So one of the things we're working on right now is to try to figure out how long it lasts. And if it doesn't last long enough, how can we make it better so it does?
I'm going to tell you what, when you was talking about the little bullets and the rivets on there and stuff, I'm thinking, wow, I always thought I was kind of a smart person. And then I thought, boy, I feel like a real dumbass now.
When you know that you've got something that, like Ebola or something like that, are you kind of like, oh, shit, if something goes bad here? Because I was reading a story about Ebola, and I guess a lady was researching it, and she accidentally pricked her hand.
Yeah, that's from the hot zone. That's actually from the same book where we discovered that one species of Ebola near D.C. Yeah, I mean, and there have been accidents because anytime, I don't care what you do in life, there's going to be accidents. Yeah. Especially for, when we work in the field safety is obviously number one for us because you're working with something that can kill you. Yeah.
And not a pleasant death either.
No. So it's safety, we preach it every day in the lab, just.
So this has been the most interesting
how
podcast
does
we've had.
Ebola, it what does it do? It erodes your blood vessels?
No, that's what a lot of people thought it did. It basically, in a lot of ways, like COVID causes dysregulation of your whole immune system. Ebola basically attacks your immune system and makes it go haywire, for lack of a better term. And it causes multiple organ failure. It gets into all of your organs and shuts them down. And it causes what we call disseminated intravascular coagulation, or DIC. So it's like, if you're familiar with people, you've probably heard of people going to the hospital and they get like sepsis, and they die of septic shock. That's what Ebola is. It's almost identical to that. It's what we call a cytokine storm. So it affects, you have cells in your body called macrophages that kind of are little Pac-Man. They go around scarfing things up. Well, that's the cell Ebola likes to grow in, unfortunately. And so, and when it attacks those cells, they release all of these substances from the macrophages into your body, and that just it makes your immune system go crazy, and basically your vessel you have clotting problems, and it's once it gets to that stage, it's hard to control.
When you go to a convention with other virologists and y'all sit downs and stuff, are you the only one that hunts and is a normal guy?
There's a couple others, but yeah, I'll be honest. I'd probably say I'm a little bit of an outlier in my field.
I could see that for sure.
I mean, my buddy and I, the guy Heinz Feldman that I was telling you about, that it's really more his idea than mine on the Ebola vaccine, but we did it together. He's one of my best friends, and he's a German guy, and he's actually in Montana right now running the biosafety level 4 lab there. But we had a friend who was a little older than us that we kind of liked, who was more like us, because Heinz kind of grew up a jock like I did. So, I liked what I don't like dressing up in suits and ties, and so one of the big scientific meetings we were at, where all the professors and they're all dressed up in their nice suits, and with this one guy we liked, he was like a young rock star, and his name was Boo Nicholson, and we liked him. And Boo would come in and he'd wear blue jeans and like nice pair of shoes and then a dress jacket and a button-down shirt, and we kind of copied that. Heinz and I would start showing up, to the point later in my career where I come in with torn up blue jeans and a t-shirt and a sport jacket, and
you seem like a really normal guy to have such an important job.
It's funny, without one less, it's like when Rick, I didn't know Rick Perry was really, I knew he was from somewhere in West. And so during the Ebola outbreak, 2014, Rick comes to the, right after John Cornyn, we like our BL4 lab, it's like a built like a square within a square within a square, right? And so there's like, you have all these walls, and then you go in through a personal shower. You strip down your birthday suit. You walk through a shower like we would just take a normal shower, and then you go in a room where there's spacesuits. You put your spacesuit, or you're in scrubs then, and you put your spacesuit on, and then you go through this big car wash, like we call it a disinfectant shower, and then you go into the BL4 lab. And this whole thing is surrounded, like it's like, you just think about a square or a rectangle. And there's a hallway around that has windows that you can look in and see people. And we call that the buffer corridor. And until the Ebola outbreak, we've never nobody ever got to go in there. And then when Senator Cornyn came first, they kind of made an exception to policy for the senator. And then, so then Rick Perry came not long after that, with the Dallas thing. And he got off the elevator right there, and I had 2 of my students back in the spacesuit. So I'm sitting here in street clothes, and Rick Perry and I are sitting there looking at this window, and my students are on the other side in spacesuits. And Rick walks up to me, and he's dressed up, and I've got blue jeans on. I did have a tie. I had a jacket. I had a button-down shirt and a jacket on, and had my cowboy boots. And he walks up to me, and he goes. He looks at my cowboy boots and he said, "Where are you from, son?" And I said, "I'm from West Virginia." He goes, "No, what part of Texas are you from?" And I said, "Oh, you wouldn't know. It's a little town called Albany." And he starts laughing, and he goes, "You know where Paint Creek? It's Paint Creek. Right?
Paint Creek is where, yes."
And he goes, "I'm from Paint Creek." And he goes, and he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, do you know the Tynerts or Jamie Nail?" And I said, "I know Jamie Nail." And we start pulling out. And you should see the handlers are there, and we're starting to pull these things out. It was funny, and it was just, and then it was just, then we had a connection where I think he understood who I was, and then we could start asking questions and feel comfortable, and it was great to have somebody like that and you could communicate with.
How worried are you about biological warfare?
I'm more worried about bioterrorism than I would be biological warfare. I think it's the technology for a foreign government to take something really nasty like Ebola, mass produce it, and disseminate it to a large population is really high. You're talking really high-end technology. Mm-hmm. I'm more worried about, bioterrorism where somebody would infect themselves with Ebola and walk into a population, right?
Right.
Or stuff like that. I'm much more worried about the 9/11 scenarios. And you can do a lot of damage like that.
I'm assuming there's some stuff that we've got at Alamogordo. That's the lab place, right? There's It's not Alamogordo. It's Los Alamos.
Los Alamos,
where they've got stuff, and I'm sure our government's growing crap that we don't need to be growing. Also,
I have no idea.
Man is an evil person. That's our biggest problem right now.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, you know, the more we educate people and the more that, you know, I'm a big believer in technology, and I think it's always good to stay one step ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's always like try to stay one step ahead of what the bad guys are doing or what somebody else is thinking of. I mean, I you know, it's sad to think that anybody would do something where they would use a biological weapon, but you know, again, we had guys flying airplanes on 9/11. So
we may be living that right now, though.
You know, it's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a crazy time that we're in, and my hat's off to you. I don't. Number one, I'm not smart enough, but just knowing that one misstep and everything's going to go haywire in here. How do you account for, like, so everybody's got different genetics. When you're making a vaccine, how do you get something that's going to kind of go work for everybody, even everybody?
You really don't know. I mean, this is why we do safety tests on vaccines, right? Mm-hmm. And you do what we call efficacy tests on vaccines or just immunogenicity. We do what we call a phase 1 trial before you even see if it's going to work against an agent or you know, when you make a vaccine in the beginning, you have volunteer. I mean, people get paid. They volunteer to take a vaccine.
Is there a lot of money in that?
I don't know. Poor college students
sell plasma, and
you know, so people, you know, you'll have a population and they'll take a vaccine, and you want to make sure, number one, that the vaccine's safe, that it doesn't do any harm, right? Mm-hmm. And then number two, you want to know if there's enough data or evidence to suggest that it'll actually work. So you're going to take blood from those people, and you're going to look at their immune response. You're going to see if they develop antibodies. You're going to see if they develop what we call a T-cell response, which, you know, is like a cellular immune response where your cell's going to attack the virus. And if it's good enough, then they'll move into a more advanced trial where you'll try the vaccine in at-risk populations.
So how many times we'll use Ebola for instance? How many times did you have to go back to the drawing board and like how many times was it tweaked?
Oh, because yeah. So my whole career in the 1990s was developing failed Ebola vaccines.
What was wrong with them? They just didn't take?
No, we learned a lot about animal models, and it's why we started using and why we went to monkeys, because we had models, like you try to test things, and it's good. Ethically, you want to do that. You don't want to put something in a monkey until you know that should be the last place you go. But I mean, we were testing stuff in mice and guinea pigs. Right. And mice and guinea pigs weren't giving us the right answers.
Just because we're not
genetically monkeys aligned. Are genetically very similar to humans, 99%.
Right.
So, you know, we would test something in a mouse and a guinea pig, and we'd get all excited. You know, we go out and have beers, man, this is great, it protects all. Then we put it in a monkey, and they'd all die. Not so great.
That's got to be so frustrating.
It is, and that's why when something works, it's so special, because you know, when we had that study that we did with my buddy Hines, you know, the spiky virus, what we call the VSV, the virus with the spikes, you know, the bullet virus with the spikes. Mm-hmm. When that worked, I think that was probably the summer of 2003. Man, we were doing somersaults. You know,
I can see that though. I mean, it would be so frustrating. And then when you get the government red tape on something that works, and they don't want to do it yet.
Yeah, I mean, we were frustrated. It's just, you see things and you sit there for what, 2003 when we knew it worked in monkeys to 2014 or 15 before they decide, you know, before there's a decision where somebody actually picks it up and can do something and starts the process. And even when they picked it up in 2014, it took Merck 5 years to license it.
One of the things I'm impressed with the most is to think that you've had probably many opportunities to go to work for a different company and make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the guy who invented Viagra has probably cashed in billions of dollars, and you've saved millions of people, and you've done it all on working for someone in the military or something. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that speaks a lot of you.
Thank you. I mean, you know, and I think that's why I like Albany, because I like, you know, it's so great to be around people that, you know, I've been so many places, and his family's been so great to us, and, you know, you come in as an outsider, and, you know, a lot of times it's hard to get accepted. I mean, I'm from a small town, and, you know, back in Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland area, and I know, you know, an outsider comes in, and sometimes, especially a small rural town, and you know, it's great to be around people that care about people. And I think one of the things when I came to Albany that I noticed was the willingness of people to help each other. And, and I'm not against the government helping people at all, but it's great when people help other people.
Oh, I agree.
And don't let him lie to you. He's pretty eat up with deer hunting, too.
That's the whole reason, right? You imagine that neighbor he's got, too, that's like, now, Gladys, just give him some goddamn cough syrup. You can call Tom and see if it's okay for him to take it. He'll know if he's going to have an allergic reaction. He can read the back of that bottle and tell you what's in it.
So how does like medicine, how does that differ? Is that basically the same process as making a vaccine? Just it's just for everything, like
you mean like a drug?
Yeah, like a drug.
Exactly the same, pretty much. Not exactly, but very similar. So it's just we work with antiviral. I'm a virologist, so we're not really working with things that would protect you against a bacteria, for example, like antibiotics. So we're working with antivirals. But I mean, we would work with a lot of times. We work with companies. During COVID, we worked with Eli Lilly. It's a big company. But they have an antiviral, and then, we'll test it in the laboratory. We'll take it and put it in what we call cell culture, just, Petri dishes or flasks with cells. And we'll just see if it stops the virus from growing first. And then if that works, then we'll go to what we call a small animal model. So we may test it in a mouse or a hamster or a guinea pig or a ferret or something like that. And if it works, then we'll move up to a monkey and see if it works. And usually with a lot of things we work with, then, COVID was different because a lot of things went straight to humans because it was a national world pandemic and emergency. But the normal process would be that you would go through different animal species, and then, once you have enough data, then you test it in humans. But at the same time, companies are working with the chemistry, with chemists, and with people that do what we call toxicology. They want to look at the drug, and they're doing a lot of really fancy high-end testing to make sure that it's not going to cause illness, that it's toxic. And like I said, I was worried when you put foreign substances in anybody's body that they're going to have some kind of a toxic effect. So, with any kind of drug you put in somebody, you want to make sure that, and a lot of this can be done even before you put it in an animal, because historically we know what kind of compounds cause problems. And so you're always trying to test things and make sure they're safe before you put them in a human.
How did rats get this rap where they're going to be the first line of pump this thing in there and let's see if he's still there in the morning?
Yeah, they're convenient. A lot of times it was convenient.
That monkey was happy as shit when they passed him up on the COVID test and they started Joe the crackhead to come in there and make this $47 or whatever it is to take this shot.
We got to get this done in a hurry, so let's bring in people off the streets. Yeah. Screw the monkeys.
When I worked for the Army for 23 years, they had these guys called conscientious objectors that would, they didn't want to go to Vietnam, or they didn't want to be drafted, or, this is kind of my dad telling me these stories, but we even they called them MERVs or something. I can't remember what the acronym. Everything in the Army is an acronym, right?
Yeah.
And medical something, enlisted research volunteers or something, and they would give them a lot of the vaccines that we worked on when I worked for the Army. They would lock these guys in what we called the clinical isolation ward, and they had ping pong tables and pool tables and gave them beer and stuff like that. But they would basically they get paid, and of course back in my dad's day, that was how they a lot of them would get out of being drafted, or they wouldn't have to go somewhere.
I'm gonna get injected full of drugs, buddy. They're gonna give me beer and I can play ping pong. You're gonna be shot by Charlie, but by God, I'm gonna be over here testing. That's
crazy.
But you know what? There's a lot of poor people out there that need a job.
So college students need some extra money. I guess you volunteer to get vaccinated.
I know a lot of guys that have sold plasma over the years back in the day, but I don't know anybody that's got paid to take a vaccine.
I'd be scared. A couple things. So like the COVID vaccination, I'd be terrified. Hopefully it would make me sterile so I don't have to get my penis cut on. So that would be a plus. And then maybe 10 years from now it makes your penis grow bigger. That would be a plus. So
Can you imagine the old monkey guy that was doing the Viagra testing with the monkeys? But that was an interesting little thing. He's
got a heart on every time I come in here. Little bastard. We had a friend who works for, it's a 3-letter organization, and he's a bomb disposal guy, and he was in New Mexico at the
Los Alamos.
And they got a bomb threat. And sure as shit, they look under the monkey cage, and there's the package. So he flips quarter to see who's going to have to go under the monkey cage, and they're pissed, and they're jumping up and down, and they're throwing shit at him, and he's like, "Get under there!" Of course, he won the flip, so he did not have to go defuse the bomb. So he's like, "Get your ass under there with those monkeys." He's like, "Don't worry about what they're carrying. Get under there and defuse that bomb."
The guy
boy.
told him too that worked there. He said, "Well, I don't understand if it just blows up. Who cares and shit?" He said, "You don't understand. If those monkeys get out, they're shit. They are carrying diseases that we cannot get up. You know, they can't go."
So,
well, it was very good having you on. I really appreciate
it. I like I told Andy, right?
Yeah.
I think it's good when scientists come out and try to talk to the public and what you guys are doing and these podcasts and try to explain things as best we can. And I hope I've tried to be transparent.
You dummied it down enough that we understood, and I appreciate that.
And I've tried to be honest. And if I don't know the answer, I think it's just good to say you don't know the answer.
So, before we let you go, if there is one thing that you think could have been done differently in this COVID outbreak, what would it have been?
I don't know that there's anything that we could have done because of the way international travel is right now.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that could have been done is if China would have reported this to the World Health Organization sooner, so that decisions could have been made. And if you would have quarantined areas off, and I'm just saying potentially,
right?
If you would have had the ability to identify the cases quicker and quarantine them off quicker, that would have really helped. But you've seen globally, because of the way people travel globally right now, how can you stop? I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Unless you're going to totally shut down air travel everywhere all at the same time, and then how do you keep people from coming in by boats and other ways? I mean, and you saw how fast this spread. It was crazy. I mean, I think in the beginning there were some mistakes made with the rapid testing. I don't think the testing was as good as it was supposed, as it could have been in the beginning. That could have slowed it down a little bit. How do you stop this?
Right.
I mean, excuse me, we're not the only country. I mean, every country's had a problem. We're not, I mean.
We're lucky we're isolated.
Yeah.
More than us. If it would have been in Zimbabwe, though, they would have shut off the whole country and they would have kept those people there. Because it was China, and all of our goods come from China, from Amazon to everyone else. And that's been one of the things I've really been surprised, and I don't know shit about it, but that it didn't come over in container ships. Because I was worried when you get all your stuff from Amazon that comes from China, oh crap, you're bringing this stuff into your home.
I
just think
it's not. That's what I'm saying. But who knew at the time?
Yeah, nobody knew.
We are such a global society right now.
Yep.
I don't know how you could have done anything. I don't think any president, no president could have done anything to have stopped this from coming to the United States. It's just, I don't see how you could possibly have done it. The only thing that could have, like I said, I think the only chance in the beginning is if China knew what was going on, if this could have been reported early in the game, where you could have perhaps tried to stop it from coming out of China.
I think Trump done a damn good job doing it. I'm damn sure glad he was president and not Mr. Cuomo.
Well, and that's the thing is, no shit, Cuomo. He'll be out of the office.
I know we're not getting in politics with you, but did you see where I'm gonna ask Bucky?
We'll tell Bucky.
Bucky can answer this. Did you see where they found out that all of Cuomo's buddies and friends got all this special treatment, and these doctors would have to treat them over everybody else? So it was like royalty. And one of the doctors they interviewed today was talking about how it was a lady, I think, she felt just horrible about it, She goes, I'm a doctor. I'm not here for just rich people, or it's for everybody. But they had special deals where their brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws went, and they got all this special treatment. And, what's his name? Guido or whatever his name is, the brother that Fredo.
Oh, Fredo.
That he was part of it too at CNN. All that deal. That's just bullshit. You don't politicize this stuff.
No, not at all.
It's a horrible deal, and what's going on is horrible right now. And hopefully, we're on the backside of this.
I sure hope so.
And then we can deal with it. What was the one coming out of
Malaysia?
Nipah.
What was
Nipah virus.
Nipah virus.
Yeah.
Somewhere down the road, we're going to be dealing with the Nipah virus.
I hope not. It's a lot worse.
No, I agree, but it'll happen one day. It'll be something we deal with.
Fucking bats.
And Andy be all scared to death. And every time he sees a deal, he says, "Dude, there's a Nipah virus."
So you're not going to go to Austin and check out the bats under the bridge?
No, they're disgusting.
Why does anybody want to go to
here.
Austin?
I don't know.
They're nasty looking critters too. We had 2 of them in here, and one of them was laying on the ground. And
I say best thing Texas could
terrible.
do is trade Oklahoma and give them Austin, and we get Oklahoma City.
I'll take that.
That would be a 10 times. What an improvement for us it would be. Yeah.
I think Oklahoma would have a problem with that though.
Oh, if I was them, I'd be madder than hell over that shit.
It is not beneficial to Oklahoma.
Well, hey, I appreciate you being on here, Tom. We're taking a lot of time. It's been very enjoyable. I hope you shoot your big old deer. What's the biggest deer you've shot?
Oh, what's that one I was showing Jamie? 176.
That's more than you need to brag about already. That's bigger. That's bigger than any deer killed in West Virginia, huh?
This
oh my
guy
God! Yeah.
kills.
Oh, the first time I came here, Tim Mariner was still alive, and he was guiding me. And the first time I went on, we were on that horseback hunt, but we were hunting out of pickup trucks, and I saw 40-some deer in the first afternoon, and we're watching. We come up on that big wheat field in the middle of the ranch, and there's probably an 8-point buck that's maybe 135 inches breathing the doe, and I'm begging Tim to let me shoot him, and he goes, "He's a baby."
176 inches.
If there's a big deer or a deer that's got like 47 drop tines, he'll shoot him every time.
You've shot a couple of drop tines?
Yeah.
What
So
did
not
that deer
only are you-
score last year that got run over? Do you
Which
know?
one?
Which deer?
The one
That
Wade
deer-
found?
The one that
That Wade found?
yes.
He's like 174.
The one up on
Yeah.
Black. Yeah.
Was that the same deer Zach had seen?
Probably.
Zach was
Right
talking
there,
about a
it was
big
right
deer.
there at the state park in the windy S curves right there.
And they've got that land right there.
Yeah, on the east side of the road.
A lot of deer over on their place that nobody hunts.
Oh yeah.
He told Andy he could probably come shoot a deer there. And
Wade's sitting on
Who?
a gold mine.
no, I'm talking about Zach and them. They got a place over there.
Oh,
That's
where at?
right there. It
Oh,
connects
that's right.
to it.
Yeah.
I don't want to say the
Up
name
on
of the
the river.
place.
Okay.
River. So
So-
north of
Our middle son married
North of
well.
State Park.
Oh, north
Fort
of State Park.
Griffin.
So border Walker Buckler?
Yeah. No, it's on the other side of the road, kind of behind.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
So not only are you saving lives, you're just dropping big deer like it's going out
Yeah.
of
I
style.
love the deer
Y'all
hunt.
hear him talk about deer. It gets as technical as this.
Love to hunt deer.
We're not as technical here. Waterfowl hunting is damn sure not near as technical as deer hunting.
The genetic modification on deer is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, just they're
Well, that's
breeding
what I like
them to
about
be
Albany.
big
It's
deer.
like open range, low
Right.
fence, open range.
Well, you've been a very good guest. Bucky, I would like to have you come back on and talk history of
I'm
your
glad I
area.
didn't have to talk. I was fun. I've heard stories like this my whole life, but I learned a lot more today than.
I learned more today than I have in a long time. He's used words we'll never use on here again. I can guarantee you.
No, I'm going to keep the trend going.
There's
I'm going to go
no-
back and listen.
There's no way. That cloning word, what was it?
Huh?
What was the cloning word he
Jeff.
used? And hemorrhaging word.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, I
all it's
know.
all bad
Genetic
shit.
engineering.
Genetic engineering
Is this
and
Blake's chair?
beer.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Y'all
why
need
it's
to
so
get
low
him
to the
to buy
ground.
it.
Well,
No,
see, deer
now y'all
hunters, I
another
mean,
one.
we genetic engineering with deer, right?
Yeah,
Is it wallered out?
Bad.
very
Yeah.
very
Blake's-
bad.
Blake is a very aggressive setter.
He slept in my guest bedroom.
Did he wipe it out?
Yes.
Yeah. Did your wife go, what the hell?
Did he leave bubble gum on the nightstand?
No, he didn't. He left a bottle of water. I
Did he
think.
leave, did he
That
leave,
was it?
did he leave one sock?
No, he didn't.
Okay, good.
He
Don't
didn't
touch it
leave
if he
anything.
does.
I washed the sheets before she got home. So
He
He wiped out our house. Didn't
He's-
flush the toilet one day.
he
My wife
stayed
was
with-
not impressed.
Yeah, left a turd in the bowl and bubble gum on the nightstand.
what are you doing?
Yeah.
Bubble gum on the nightstand. Guys, we appreciate you coming all the way out here to do
Absolutely.
this with us.
Y'all
This
have
was
an
a lot of
amazing
fun.
place out here.
All right. Well, you need to come shoot some waterfowl one day.
I told him that next year we're going to bring with Jamie and Gus
Good.
and everybody.
Good. We'd like to have you out here.
That'll be a lot of fun. Oh, fuck, we didn't even get to talk about the avian shit. Well, that's too close to home. I don't want to ruin waterfowl hunting for me, so we'll just skip it. We appreciate you guys.
Thank y'all. God bless y'all.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
Go check out all of our sponsors. Check out Bangtail Whiskey, shipping all over the place. Stanfield Hunting Outfitters, Goose Creek Retrievers, Gundog Outdoors, Pacific Custom Calls, Blind Grass Camouflage System, Dive Bomb Industries, Boss Shot Shells, Dirty Duck Coffee, Lucky Duck, and the Looking Glass Duck Club. Hint, hint.